Greetings, beloved Star Child Rising. You are in Christina's Corner. And welcome back to the podcast where I have an opportunity and the honor of highlighting and celebrating individuals who are out here leveraging their skills and their talents to make a positive impact on the world. And today is no different. Today, we have the privilege of engaging with the truly impactful educator and diversity consultant, Rosetta Lee. With a career dedicated to empowering youth and fostering inclusive communities, Rosetta's work spans a wide range of crucial areas, including cross cultural communication, identity development, implicit and unconscious bias, gender and sexuality diversity, and bullying prevention. Currently a faculty member at Seattle Girls School, where she teaches a diverse array of subjects from science and math to ethics and social justice, Rosetta also serves as a sought after, very well sought after, presenter, trainer, facilitator, and consultant, working with hundreds of schools, universities, and organizations nationwide. A graduate of Harvard University with a degree in biology, Rosetta's path to education was somewhat accidental, evolving from aspirations in medicine to a passion for theater and ultimately a deep commitment to creating supportive and equitable learning environments. Her ability to connect with both students and adults, coupled with her expertise in curriculum development and cultural competency, has established her as a leading voice in the field. I've been inspired by and following, maybe stalking, this amazing human for many years. Please join me in welcoming a dedicated advocate for equity and inclusion, the insightful and inspiring Rosetta Lee. Welcome, Rosetta.
Thank you for the invitation, Christina. I hope I live up to all that hype.
You do. Absolutely. You know how hard me and Gemma chased you down to come to to visit our school. I mean, we looked far and wide, high and low, to try and get you to come and work with our school. And you made a profound, significant impact. And I know you do wherever you go. So I so appreciate and honor you, Rosetta. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So, one of the things that I do on the podcast is I come up with six questions.
hmm
And the first one always asks for you to take us back to the beginning when you were a child. What was your childhood like? What were you like as a child? And were there any signs that you would be getting into doing the work that you're doing today?
mm well, I think probably it's inevitable that I was going to work toward inclusion and justice in some way, shape, or form. I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and my one of three daughters, and my dad was a chief engineer at a Korean electronics company, and he was doing a lot of traveling abroad for business. And one of the things he noticed was that there would be some countries where women would be in the room, and they were the secretaries, and they were the caterers, and they were the assistants, and there were other countries where women would be fellow engineers and executives. And he realized Korea is one of those places where women don't have a seat at the table. And so he and my mom talked about it and really thought, do we want to raise three daughters in a place where they might not get the same kind of opportunity? So they gave up everything and moved to the United States, not knowing anyone in the country, and started from scratch so that the girls could get educational and work opportunities. And so I came over to the United States when I was 10 and not knowing a word of English, and got plopped into suburban Massachusetts, where I was one of, maybe a handful of Asian kids. Um, and for me, I think being an English language learner and in a place where I am so obviously visually the minority, and just experiencing what it feels like when people don't know you but have assumptions about you and treat you from that place, or people who exhibit curiosity and belief in you and invest in you. So I've had educators that made me feel like I couldn't achieve anything. I've had educators who made me feel like I can do anything and would go out of their way to make me realize that. And so I think for me, the idea of contributing to young people's opportunities and making sure that wherever I am, folks feel like they can contribute and that they matter has always been a passion of mine. And so, yeah. My initial dream when I was a child was, being a pediatric surgeon. I mean, I love biology,
Mm.
I love neurobiology, I love kids. I'm like, this is it. And I think being in a pre-med environment that was not very collegial, that was very sort of competitive and not in a healthy way. I think I found myself by junior year of college taking like 6 courses in my major, but then spending like 20, 30 hours a week in the theater because that was an environment where people of diverse talents came together and tried to make one show great. And so the thing that I was missing of like community, collegiality, cooperation, the value that comes from that kind of energy, I fed my brain in my classes and fed my soul in theater. And so I decided to defer medical school and do theater for a while. But in the meantime, a longtime mentor and friend of mine who I had worked for several years at a summer program for middle school kids was hired to be the founding head at Seattle Girls School. So she asked me to move across the country and help her start up this um, like big dream of a school. We didn't have buildings, we didn't have curricula, we didn't have kids, but man, there was a strong vision. And I said, I will give you 3 to 5 years to get it off the ground. And 20 something years later, here I
Wow.
am.
Wow.
So,
It's amazing how the universe works.
hmm
And, as you were talking about all the time that you spend in the theater, it immediately brought to mind how you so masterfully command the stage, any stage that you're on, not just with, I guess, your theater experience, but also your firsthand experience on the situations that you're talking about, on stage. So it just brought to mind that, oh, that's why. And also it comes to mind that you could have probably easily have been gotten into comedy too, because you're very funny. You're one of those people who are funny and probably don't even realize how funny you are. You're just being you, which is great.
well, I think everything that I do is just me being me. And I'm just
Hmm.
glad it's been useful and impactful and resonating and helpful. And so, for me, it's if that's happening, great. I think ultimately folks are seeking something, and I don't need to be what you're looking for, but if I am, here it is, right?
Hmm.
And so, um, I think the students see that in the classroom, and folks I do trainings with see that,
Absolutely.
and so. I think that's really all. And I think life is funny. So when we
Yeah.
talk about life, inevitably, um, I'm a big fan of laughing with and not laughing at, and I feel
Hmm.
like life provides us so many opportunities to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very much so. Okay. Thanks for sharing. All right. Number two. You spent over 2 decades at Seattle Girls School, serving in dual roles as a faculty member and outreach specialist. How does your experience working directly with middle school students inform your approach to diversity training and consulting with adults and organizations? And what unique insights do you gain from that ongoing connection to the classroom?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, an immediate thing that I brought to my training field was my classroom experience. Like I said, one of the things that I find delightful and terrifying about middle schoolers is that they can see through you, right? And
Mm.
they are searching for who they are, so they respond to adults who are who they are, right? They appreciate honesty, transparency, vulnerability, and also like healthy self-esteem. I don't pretend that I'm like, perfect. It's that idea of like, this is what I'm proud of, and this is why, and this is what I need to work on, and this is something I'm never going to be good at, and that's okay, right? And I think when you're unable to do that, I think middle schoolers, I often say like middle schoolers won't learn from anybody who's inauthentic. And so I think teaching for several years with middle schoolers, I think when I first started teaching, I had assumptions in my mind about what a good teacher looks like, sounds like, does. And what I realized is that the first and foremost thing is you have to be real.
Hmm.
And to a certain degree, I think everyone is like that. We just learn to mask and hide or pretend, right? But ultimately, I think all of us are seeking that. And so it was actually a relatively natural transition to basically it's almost like I'm training a bunch of middle schoolers in larger bodies with more learning behind them, right?
All right.
And to a certain degree, that's what theater was like for me because I was a stage manager. So when my theater friends were like, "Isn't teaching middle school going to be so different?" I'm like, honestly, I'm providing clear structures and guidance for highly creative and dramatic people to do their best work. I feel like that's theater, that's middle school, right? Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I started off in education. I started off in middle school too.
Mhm.
And that was such a great, I believe, training ground
Mhm.
for education. And people all over the years were like, "How did you do middle school? Like, how in the world can you do middle school?" But like you said, the key is being yourself, being authentic, because they can see right through
Mhm.
it, and being able to laugh at your mistakes.
Mhm.
Because when you laugh at yourself and you laugh at your mistakes, it gives them the permission to laugh at their mistakes and
Mhm.
laugh at themselves and, and create that sort of empathy. So
Mhm.
I thought middle school was a great environment to
Mhm.
learn in. So thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
All right. Number three. So, your work addresses a wide range of critical topics, including implicit bias, gender and sexuality, diversity, and bullying in schools. You've helped so many of us navigate hurdles, never outright telling folks what to do, but masterfully leading them to dive deeper as a community to co create the vision that we seek. In the current political climate where we're seeing significant pushback against DEI initiatives, what are some of the most pressing challenges you observe schools and organizations grappling with as they strive to advance this work? And how do you help them navigate these complexities?
Mhm. Well, one of the things that I think about in the context of the current times is I think the current times is like one of the things that we hadn't been doing that this time is call reminding us to do is make sure that we are communicating if, like clearly and defining what we're talking about. So for a long time, schools were using jargon and using like sort of like the hit terms of the day. They would say, DEI or DEIB and like equity and justice or whatever the case may be without ever defining it for their community, right? And we're living at a time when folks are taking these terms and misdefining them or twisting the definitions. And when you take a look at the misdefinitions, I would be against that too, right? But in the meantime, when folks like look up what it is and they're like, oh, that sounds awful. And they try to push back on it. And the community's like, why are they against it? I'm like, because you've never told them what this work is actually about, right? And so that idea of what is this work about? What does it look like in the classroom? Why is it important to every single child? If we're not doing that forward work, then I think schools are always on the defensive or in the justification action instead of just concentrating on doing the good work. So that's one piece. The second piece I think is For me, I don't know how to be a good teacher if I'm not an inclusive and equitable teacher. Like for me, it's just excellence, right? And
Mhm.
so what I find sometimes troubling is when schools talk about excellence or teaching and learning in one breath, and then in a separate conversation talk about diversity and inclusion
Exactly.
in another
Hmm.
breath. And I'm like, those two things are actually like really integrated. So the reality is kids can basically find out anything they want to if they have an internet connection, right? There's no content limitations anymore, but what you can't Google is are things like critical thinking or creativity or collaboration or communication. Those kinds of things that you need fellow people and opportunities to like live, work, and play. And for me, if you can't do that with a cross difference, then it's mediocre. Like, talk about communication. You can be an effective communicator, but if you're only able to communicate with people like you, but not with people who are not like you, that's actually not like lower than excellent communication skills. So if we're seeking excellence, then we have to make sure that they know how to be responsive and be adaptive and be polite in different settings, whether that be cultural, race and gender, class, etc. Right? So I would love to see organizations really tap into how is belonging work, cultural fluency, and competency work actually integral to the daily work of the organization, and how it's directly tied to all measures of excellence, whether that's academic output, like financial stability, profit margins, if you're talking about a business, like this is actually tied to success, right?
Those were excellent points. Because if we don't dive deeper to find ways to measure the
Hmm.
success of what we're doing, then all we do is talk in circles, and that just makes
Hmm.
everybody irritable
Hmm.
and negative about the whole situation. And so those were really great points, especially the communication and to extend it to the external
Hmm.
part of the environment, to the parents and
Hmm.
the board. So they're in on it as well. So great stuff, Rosetta.
Hmm.
All right. So, Rosetta, you work with hundreds of K through 12 schools, as well as numerous colleges,
Hmm.
universities, and other organizations. Looking back on your life and career, are there one or two watershed moments, either personally or professionally, that significantly impacted your path and solidified your dedication to this field?
Hmm. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say there was like a singular moment that I could point to, but I think it was the same way I responded as with to my childhood. I think initially it was this idea of how do I be what others want me to be? How do I succeed according to external measures of what success looks like, right? And so I assimilated into US mainstream culture. I like left everything Korean about me at the school doors. I would also like I was one of the few working class kids in a predominantly wealthy neighborhood, and it was that idea of like um blend, hide, don't sort of like convey. Um, and for me, I think I got a certain surface level amount of acceptance when I did that, but that was actually not acceptance, that was just fitting in, right? And I think it took me a while to realize, all those hoops that I'm jumping through, that energy that I'm putting toward being something those folks tell me to be or what they want to see, is energy that's not going toward my own excellence, pursuing my passions, discovering where my energies are drawn to. And I think as soon as I like stopped performing for others is actually when I became the best like the best student, the best employee, whatever version of myself. And I think that's true with somebody who is doing trainings. I think initially it was about how do I do things in a palatable way, right? How do I do it so that I don't upset anybody or say things in the way that they want to hear them and things like that. And um, I think to a certain degree, I didn't see communities making the strides I thought they were capable of because I was keeping them comfortable.
Mm.
And so I think for me over the years, I'm like, you know what? I never intended to be a consultant. I'm very flattered by the invitations, but let's face it, if the work that I'm doing and the way that I'm doing it is not resonating, that's fine. I'm happy to go back into the classroom. And I think that idea of I don't need to be liked. And this is something I say, right? I don't need to be liked. I just want to be effective, right? And I think that shift actually made me a better presenter, trainer, etc. Because, sometimes organizations will say things to me like, well, can you do your what you do, but can you not talk about LGBTQ issues? And I'm like, I think you're seeking a different trainer,
There you go.
right?
Hmm.
Or can you not mention the word privilege? I'm like, well, it's the academic term for a lot of the things that you want to address. And so I think that idea of saying it's okay, I don't need to be liked, and it's okay, I'm not the right person for every community, but I'm not gonna shift. Like I will meet you where you are and help you move to the next stage. I'm pretty good at like sussing that out. I'm not gonna try to like move a community from, a marker 1 to like marker 27, but there are some non-negotiables of the way I do this work that it's okay if I don't get hired again.
Hmm. I love that about you, Rosetta. And so as I'm sure you know, that the work that we do is healing, not just for others, but
Mhm,
for us as well. And so this was not on my question list, but I'm
mhm,
just ad-libbing this. When when you talked about how it finally kind of clicked to you
mhm,
that you're not going to be jumping through hoops
mhm,
because it's not impactful
mhm,
or effective, did you find that the universe kind of responded and you were getting more opportunities to do it the way
mhm.
you wanted to do it? Did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I often talk to folks who do this work. I often have this conversation, right? That notion of you have so much potential and capability, and you have so much strength. And here's the thing, if you are pushing up against a styrofoam wall, just a little nudge, and that wall will move, right? Sometimes it's a neoprene wall. Like you got to give
Mm-hmm.
steady and consistent pressure, but you can feel the move. And then there are brick walls. Right. And it doesn't matter how strong you are, how passionate you are, how capable you are, that is a brick wall. And unless they're gonna take a bulldozer to it, that wall isn't going anywhere. And I think to a certain degree, when I was aiming to please, the brick wall folks would call me up, right? You know what I mean? Because I
Yes.
wasn't gonna make them uncomfortable. I wasn't gonna push in ways that, like, um, like made it imperative. Like, if you're not willing to change, then that says something about you, right? I wasn't gonna push them that level. Um, but as soon as I'm like, you know what? Again, if I'm not the right person, I'm not the right person. I think the organizations that were wanting that discomfort to actually precipitate
Mm-hmm.
change, who are willing to work past that moment or be willing to be like challenged in a good way. I think those organizations started to pop up into my schedule and they're calling me back, right? And so it's not the same people, but is there
Mm-hmm.
greater success? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of parallel that to,
Hmm.
when we work as directors
Hmm.
of equity and inclusion, and we're hired by
Hmm.
different schools. And some schools, they want you on paper,
Hmm.
right? But we want you to do equity, but not this type of equity, or that's a little bit too much equity, don't you think? And it's hard for those of us in the work because we're called to this work for a reason because of our commitment to equity. So to ask us or to make us feel that, you don't want us to do it, it makes it frustrating. And then we seem angry. But that's another story. But thank you for that. This conversation has been so deep. I appreciate it. Um, all right, so number 5. Let's see here. A core element of your philosophy involves creating spaces where individuals feel supported in their experiences and valued for who they are. How do you cultivate that sense of safety and belonging, both in your work with students in the classroom and in your training sessions with adults? And what are some practical techniques or guiding principles you use? What advice do you have for educators on the front lines of this work who are striving to create those environments that you create?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think about of creating more inclusive spaces where folks can be who they are, I think it's really about the idea of oh, well, there's like two pieces. One, which is what are the non-negotiables, right? And so as a classroom teacher, my non-negotiables are we will treat each other with dignity, kindness, and respect,
Mm-hmm.
right? We will respect our materials, we will respect people, we will respect our time, right? That's a non-negotiable, right? And if that's not something you're willing to sign up for, then you're gonna hear from me, and I'm gonna be like correcting you on a regular basis. Outside of like those non-negotiables, it's that idea of how do we co-create culture? What works for you? How do you advocate for yourself? How do you be like accepting and accommodating to others? So, one of the things that I think about is the notion of, for example, when I do assessments, right? Classroom assessments. I think oftentimes schools say, this is what you have to learn, this is the way you have to learn it,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the way you need to demonstrate that mastery, right? And so everybody has to do the same thing, right? And I get why we do that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to grade, more predictable, you can create like clear rubrics. I get that. I get that. But I also think about how, when I used to do like a invention convention project, right? Where they needed to like do a prototype, a 3D prototype, and like a 2D schematic drawing. I remember I had a student who's like, I can't wrap my mind around drawing two-dimensional shapes that go into a 3D shape. I'm just really stuck. Can I just like use cardboard and make the 3D shapes and then take it apart and see what it's made up of? I'm like, yeah, totally. And she was
Mm-hmm.
so shocked. She's like, I can do it backwards. I'm like, you can do it backwards, forwards. Like, for me, at the end of the day, I just want to see a schematic so that if we were to manufacture your invention, people know what to like, what pieces to create, and that how they assemble into a 3D shape. Like, no one's gonna know you went backwards, right? And if that's the way your mind works, that's the way your mind works, and I support that, right? Um, you know, I often think about what are the ways that we can actually give choice, agency, and a certain level of freedom. Like, how do I let go of what is my preferred method, which is actually like oftentimes teachers will define what good is, what excellent is, what right is. And I'm like, those are so many times just personal preferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, if you want to show me that you know all the organs of the body system through a poster, through an iMovie, through a rap, an interpretive dance, a paper, I don't care. I just want to know that you know all the organs of that body system
Mm-hmm.
and you know how they function.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think for me, folks feel like they belong when they can contribute to the environment and they feel like they have some sort of agency in that process under the context of, and no matter what our differences, we're going to treat each other well, and that I know I matter, and I don't have to worry about somebody, hurting me psychologically, physically, etc., right? So I think that's where the non-negotiables come in. And so I think we have too many non-negotiables. I'm like, really get down to what are the non-negotiables for like safety of a community, building of a trusting community, and what's like mission aligned if you're in an independent school. But outside of that, I know it's going to take more time. I know it's going to be harder, but the level of buy-in and the level of excellence that you see and people who feel like they can contribute meaningfully to an environment, the excellence that come back is several fold versus my defining what excellence means.
Hmm. Kind of sounds like top down, right?
Hmm.
But when these teachers and educators on the front line
Hmm.
can be more of a growth mindset and get away from that feeling
Hmm.
of this is my classroom and this is how
Hmm.
it's going to be, hook or crook,
Hmm.
you're going to do it my way, but actually, cultivate the relationships and trust with the students so that they can share some
Hmm.
of their thoughts and some of those creative ideas.
Hmm.
Those students, man, once you kind of allow them to kind of co-create what
Hmm.
the environment in the classroom is going to be, their imagination and their innovation is through the
Hmm.
roof, right? And
Hmm.
so I really like those tips. Thank
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
All right. So finally, last question. It's gone by fast because you're
Hmm.
very like, okay, next question. But I appreciate you, Rosetta. I love you to death. All right. So number 6, after years of dedication to this
Hmm.
work, what continues to drive your passion for fostering inclusive environments and empowering individuals to create a more just and equitable world? And given the demanding nature of this work, what are some of your own self-care practices or strategies for maintaining your well-being and sustaining your commitment?
Hmm. I think for me, like just engaging in self-care, period, has been a challenge, right? And so I think partially it's because of my identities and past experiences, the way I've been socialized as a woman, as an immigrant, as a somebody who grew up with like, not enough, right? That sense of like rest is indulgence, rest is selfish, like all those kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
And it took me a while to like realize the importance of self-care. So I would say I'm not an expert in self-care, but I've given myself a lot more permission to engage. Like today I was doing like a wooden puzzle building thing. Like it's just very complex. It's very sort of like meticulous and hands-on and it centers me. And it's the kind of thing that at the end of a whole lot of like time and effort, there's this like puzzle box that's like really intricate and really cool. And so I love centering myself doing projects like that. I build Lego sets, I build wooden puzzles, I do like tiny little sort of like art, dot art kind of things. It centers me in a very chaotic field of teaching and doing diversity trainings. It gives me a lot of focus. But I would say like I avoided doing a lot of that for a while because it felt like indulgence. There's so much to do and the world is on fire and what am I doing like doing this kind of thing. And it was actually David Harris, who is a therapist, and he works with athletes and he works with people who are in this work. And one of the things he talks about self-care is this: we have a tendency to offer up to others, right, from our reserves, and we deplete our reserves until we cannot do any more. And then we consider self-care just refueling just enough so that we have more to give. And one of the things he said was, so at when that's your practice, you're actually serving others through the dregs. Do
Mhm.
you want to feed others and replenish others and contribute to others from your dregs or from the abundance? And
Mhm.
so this is actually fueling yourself is actually so that you can contribute to others through a place of abundance and joy and overflow. And it made me hokey, but it made me think about self-care in a different way,
Hmm.
right?
That's very
Um, yeah, it was really helpful because I rarely gave myself permission to just take care of myself.
right.
Um, I think the other thing is this. I also like started to be give myself a little bit of a, like, grace and permission, and change how I define success, because I think it used to be that I would do a training and I'm like, not everybody was like transformed, right?
Hmm.
Or like I didn't end racism today, like, and gosh,
Right.
like that those kinds of measures, what it does is at the end of every single day makes you wonder, does it make a difference? Does it even matter? Like, you're not paying attention to the 80 people who were moved to another way of thinking or another way of feeling or being, to like focusing on the three people, right? Who, again, those are the brick wall people who it doesn't matter how powerful you were, they weren't going to move anyway. And
Right.
so I think for me, I stopped measuring my success with those unrealistic expectations. I started to measure my success in terms of, this is a poem that keeps me grounded. It's Banara Overstreet, and it's a poem that is like, stubborn ounces to the one who doubts the value of doing anything if you can't do everything, right? And I never
Mhm.
quote the poem precisely, but it goes along the lines of like, you say the little efforts that I make will make no difference, that it won't, you know, make a difference where justice hangs in the balance. Um, I never thought that they would, but I do reserve my right to add my reserve my absolute right to add my stubborn ounces to the correct side of the scale.
Mm, mm.
So I don't measure my success in terms of, did the scale tip today? Because that's a one-time event, and I need a whole lot of people, and I need to stand on the shoulders of giants, and like, and also like equip the next generation to contribute. I may or may not be around when that scale tips. And even if it tips, it can tip the other way. So for me, it's
Right.
about, at the end of the day, I'm like, did I add my stubborn ounces to the correct side of the scale? And did I increase the capacity of others to add their stubborn ounces to the correct side of the scale? And the answer is yes. Every single
Mhm,
day, I can
mhm,
proudly say yes, right? And I
mhm.
sleep peacefully at night.
Wow, that is great. And so, what I think about when I think about this entire interview is, I was thinking of when you were talking about how you don't look at success the same way anymore.
Mhm,
So, with me starting this podcast, I don't have many followers,
mhm,
I don't. But one thing that I am crystal clear about, that I know, that whoever is supposed to see and
mhm,
feel this energy that transpired between you and me will see it
mhm,
when they're supposed to see it. And
mhm.
I'm good with that,
Yeah.
because along the way, during these past, 30, 45 minutes that we spent, I learned so much just from talking to
Mhm,
you and just from feeling your energy. And I'm just so inspired. And I'm so honored that you took time out, because I know how busy you are. And I know I'm so glad that I was able to catch you before you get real super busy, because, it's like, where's Rosetta? Where can I find Rosetta? But I so appreciate this. And I hope that we can do it again at some point.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to add that when you talked about your self care,
Mhm.
I think that, you also have picked the perfect spouse for you. You guys are a match made in heaven, and it's so crystal clear that you guys are soulmates. And so, and I know that he helps in so many ways
Hmm. Absolutely.
to keep you keeping your keeping you healthy and
Hmm.
focused on self-care and that type of thing,
Hmm.
even if it's just through humor. So you guys
Hmm.
are funny as hell. So, those of you who are watching, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode of Christina's Corner. Love and light to you, and so it is.